This is The Solo Shot with your host, Jim Sonnet.
Usually, if we're going to have a tough time finding something in daily fantasy baseball, it'll be pitchers, because I tend to be a lot pickier at pitcher, because there are just fewer guys who I think are viable for DFS, who can have that upside that we need. For today, pitching's actually okay. It's more so the stacks where we run into issues, trying to identify players who we want to use in daily fantasy baseball. What we're going to do today is break down the pitchers first, but then dive into the stacks, make some consolations, and go places we wouldn't normally go, and try to figure out how to play this slate from a DFS perspective. Welcome on into the Solo Shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and NumberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonnet. I am a senior writer and analyst for NumberFire.com, here to break down Monday's 7-game main MLB DFS slate with locks set for 7:05 for tonight. And luckily for us, there is no weather for today because I could not handle having any of the good stacks we do have available to us taken away by weather. So thankfully, that is not a concern for today. We are good to just play things pretty much straight up. And again, it's also a bit cooler on the East Coast now than it was previously, which means it's less of a detriment to stack out west than it was before. So that's a positive here. All positives. They're trying to give some consolations on a rough slate, so I will thank them for that for sure. Before we dive into the pitching section for today, quick reminder, we are back on air on the FanDuel YouTube page later on today, 9 a.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube page, talking about our takeaways from week 1 of NFL DFS. That is myself and Brandon Gadula breaking down the big headlines, breaking down rule changes, injuries, and what you need to know heading into week number 2 of NFL DFS. So make sure you're subscribed to the FanDuel YouTube page. Also check out the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. So we got the NFL podcast now twice a week on Monday and Thursdays. PGA's back this week with Brandon. He'll be doing that one solo. And then I have NASCAR coming up later this week, and I think UFC back this week as well. So a lot of good stuff. Make sure you go to the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, hit subscribe, and while you're there, leave us a rating and review as well. Also, the 4 p.m. show still on. I'll be doing a Monday Night Football preview with Ryan Williams at 4 p.m. I'll stick around, talk MLB DFS at 4:30. So if you are a regular listener to the MLB DFS Q&As, those are still live just at 4:30 Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and 4 o'clock on Wednesday to account for this new NFL schedule. Hey, football fans, the NFL is finally back, and FanDuel is giving you a free way to get in on the action. The FanDuel High-Low is a free-to-play fantasy football contest. All you have to do is build your scorecard with the teams you think will score highest or lowest in 4 stat categories. The closer you are to being spot on, the more points you'll get. Players with the most points each week split the prize pool, and a perfect scorecard will win you the jackpot. Head over to FanDuel.com today and play the High-Low for free. FanDuel High-Low for free. Eligibility restrictions apply. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app for more details. Pitching preview for this Monday main slate. Clayton Kershaw is back. He is $10,900. He's not fully back. We'll talk about that and things to watch. Sandy Alcantara is $10,900. We have Adam Wainwright at $9,800. Yu Darvish is $92,000. Alek Manoah is $9,000. We have Eduardo Rodriguez, Jake Odorizzi, Zach Gallen as the other guys at being $8,000 or higher. And again, pitching easier for today than stacks. That does not mean it is a perfect slate for pitching, but I do think that there are some pretty logical options for this week, beginning at the top with Sandy Alcantara. And I am broadly a fan of Alcantara, but that's especially true recently. I like his matchups tonight too, so I think that he deserves to be number 1 despite a high salary at $10,600. Alcantara's facing the Nationals, who have been playing pretty well offensively, but on paper, this shouldn't be a good offense. They have an 88 WRC plus against righties for the full year. Their active roster does. They have a 141 ISO. Alcantara can take advantage of those numbers if we assume that they haven't magically become the world's best offense. Alcantara really doesn't have a lot to play for right now, and that can be a negative, but like with him specifically, you can't tell. Like, there's no way you'd be able to tell this dude has nothing to play for right now, because he went 114 pitches his last time out. He went 111 a couple starts before that, and he's doing really well in those extended pitch counts too. He's been using more sliders over his past 7 starts, and Alcantara was interesting because he had been featuring his changeup more earlier on this year, trying to neutralize lefties who had given him fits in the past. that was successful. He adds in the slider now, and that kills righties. And it makes sense. We've seen Alcantara really kick things up a notch in this time. He has a 30% strikeout rate over the 7 starts with a 3.05 skill interactive ERA. He is still letting up just a 29% fly ball rate. So Alcantara, with this slider usage being up and having pitches that can obliterate all hitters, he's pitching like a legit stud. And I think that we should treat him like one in DFS. Yes, 10-6 is a high salary, but I'm down to pay it personally. I think he's worth that. And, I think that on a slate where we're lacking certainty, I will take the 1 ounce of certainty we do get, and that is putting Sandy Alcantara at the top of my list. Number 2 for me is going to be a risky option. Alcantara, I think, is pretty safe. I like him for cash games and stuff, but it's a risky option that has upside and has paid off for us in the past. That's Eduardo Rodriguez. His ERA is over 5 this year, and that's not great, obviously. But I still think he has a path to a big game because he's shown us he has a path to a big game. A big part of this is the matchup. And Rodriguez is facing the Mariners. They are a big strikeout team against lefties with a 26% strikeout rate. That's the highest mark on this slate. And they also don't walk too much. And that should help Rodriguez be efficient with his pitches and not get in. He gets in issues. Like he gets in a mess a lot of times. And, it is a concern for sure. But he can't get strikeouts. He has a 27% strikeout rate over his past 8 starts with fewer sinkers. His hard hit rate is 32%. It hasn't always worked out because his ERA in this time, even in the stretch we're talking about here, is 4.95, so very similar to his full season mark. But he's had pop games. He had 46 FanDuel points against the Rays 2 starts ago, 46 against Baltimore, 51 against Detroit, and Seattle is a plus matchup for a lefty. I think that Rodriguez can do it again. So I will run it back here and see if he can have another upside night. It could go poorly, but that's why we're going to use Rodriguez in the formats in which we care more about upside than floor, which is all of them, frankly. We don't really care about floor anywhere. But I do think that for tournaments tonight, Rodriguez is one of those guys with a path to a big game, and I will use him as a result of that. Number 3 for me is Yu Darvish. Rodriguez is the value play here, but also just a guy I'd rank second. Darvish is higher salaried at $9,200, but again, it's about the upside here. He's facing the Giants, which is why Darvish is not safe, and that's why he's not higher. It's a super tough matchup. It does help that it's at a generally good park, and Yu is still getting strikeouts. He's been throwing more four-seamers over his past 10 starts, which is pretty strange for him. It's typically a low-usage pitch. He's been throwing it more recently, though, and I don't think that fastball usage is why he's struggling, because the peripherals are still good. He has a 27% strikeout rate with a 5% walk rate. His hard hit rate is 34%. So the struggles have been there. He's let up some earned runs for sure, but it also could be bad luck. It could be just because of the fly balls. I'm not really sure. But the overall takeaway from looking at Darvish's peripherals is I don't think he's broken. And he showed that last time out because he held the Angels to 1 run over 6 innings. He had 7 strikeouts. He also had 12 against Arizona earlier on this month. He hasn't faced the Giants in a long time. That means that they shouldn't be too familiar with his stuff, and Darvish is now a different pitcher than he was back then due to the altered pitch mix. So there's a path to a good game here. I don't feel great about it. Like, it's not a safe stack or a safe pitching option by any means, but there aren't a lot of pitchers in the slate with the ceiling. I think that it's a fine pitching slate, but like not a lot of dudes can put up, 50 to 60. Darvish is one of them. So I will take some swipes here exclusively in tournaments and see what he can do for tonight. But to me, it's Alcantara number 1 for sure. I have Rodriguez 2, slightly ahead of Darvish, and then Darvish number 3. So that's the pitching, and the pitching is the better part, the shining pinnacle of how things look from a pitching perspective for tonight. Stacking is tougher. Stacking is a lot tougher. And there aren't really any spots I truly want to go at. So keep that in mind, and we'll see how things play out. But to me, I do think that the Cardinals are interesting. They're facing Rich Hill, who has gotten good results recently. He's let up 2 runs or less in 3 straight starts, but he's benefited from some plus matchups. The tougher spot for Rich Hill is going to be tonight against the Cardinals, and I want to stack them and see what happens when he does face that tougher offense. The primary motivator for stacking against Hill is that the peripherals for him are not great. Hill has been getting less vertical break on his curveball over his past 9 starts, And the strikeout rate has gone way down in that time. He has a 20% strikeout rate. He's letting up fly balls 43% of the time. And he's also got a low walk rate, which is good for him, but it also means we get more balls in play, which is what we want for DFS. One thing that Hill is doing really well right now is keeping the hard contact low. That's part of why his ERA is good. But it's hard to tell how much of that is from the matchups, facing teams that don't make a lot of hard contact. Hill has done pretty well in that department against better teams as well, so that's why it's not a perfect spot. And again, that's why the stacking landscape tonight is pretty tough, but I still think the Cardinals are pretty solid here. I am fine putting them first, given the wonkiness at stacks for this slate. It does help, too, that the Cardinals, very easy to stack with Alcantara. Nobody here has a salary higher than $3,600. Tommy Edman is $2,900. Yadier Molina is $2,500. Both those guys have good power numbers against lefties. Edman doesn't really against righties, but against lefties, he's at 240. Molina's at 246 from an isolated power perspective. So those are guys we can turn to in our Alcantara lineups, and you can use them with Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. Again, nobody here above $3,600, so they're an easy team to stack when you are going with Alcantara at pitcher, and I think that is the way I want to start off my lineups for tonight. Alcantara at pitcher, Cardinals as the first stack. The second stack is going against a pitcher I like. I like Logan Gilbert a lot. I think he's a very good pitcher, and I will use him in DFS next year. I can almost guarantee that. I just think we might want to stack against him in this specific matchup tonight. So it's the Red Sox. It's a very tough spot. They have a 111 WRC plus against righties with a 207 ISO, which is the highest number on the slate, and they also don't strike out too much. That's the key thing, the low strikeout rate that worries me with Gilbert, because Gilbert is doing that well. He's getting strikeouts right now. He's had his current pitch mix for his past 11 starts, and in that time, his strikeout rate is 26%, which is solid, and I would take it if I were him, happily, for sure. 26% will work. But things go poorly for Gilbert when he doesn't get strikeouts. And if he's facing a low strikeout team, that's a concern. He's letting up a 45% hard hit rate and a 45% fly ball rate. That's why his ERA is 4.87 in this time, even though he is getting those strikeouts. If the Red Sox make contact, they should be able to do some damage, and I would expect them to make contact here. So the Red Sox are a good stacking option. Again, the reason this is not like I love this one is because I like Gilbert, don't want to stack against him, but I think in this spot, it does make a lot of sense. As far as the individual Red Sox go, I have typically targeted Bobby Dahlbeck just against lefties because the strikeout rate was way too high against righties, but he's been otherworldly recently. We've seen Dahlbeck just against righties have 63 plate appearances since the start of August. He has home runs in 9 of those 63 plate appearances. And more importantly, at least for me, not for everyone else, but for me, his strikeout rate is 22%. Again, specifically against righties since the start of August. His ISO is 589. It's unreal. He's still $2,900, and sure, I'll probably hit lower in the order, but Austin Swain called him Big Fly Bobby on Twitter. I kind of like it. I'm going to go Bobby Big Fly because it flies off. I kind of like the flow of it. Bobby Big Fly. As via Austin Swain, that nickname there. Bobby Big Fly, going to be in my lineups for tonight. That may be more common. I just heard it from Austin first. But either way, Bobby Big Fly, a staple for DFS for tonight. The final stack isn't as solid as I'd like. But again, it's a good offense facing what will effectively be a bullpen game. That's the Astros, and I don't mind stacking them here. They're facing Spencer Howard to start, and Howard probably not going to stick in this game super long. He's gone 52 or fewer pitches in every start with the Rangers, and then he gives way to the bullpen. Howard is not a shutdown guy, though he's not bad. I don't think he's bad, just not a shutdown guy. He's more middling, which is tough against an offense like Houston's. It's a similar thing for the bullpen where they're not terrible. Their ERA is 4.02 based on their current active roster. The problem comes when you stretch that bullpen out and make them last a full game. That means you're getting middle relievers going longer than they're used to, and that can lead to a lot of issues. For the most part, they've been okay at Howard starts. They did have one pretty big blow-up in there, but I think that the repeat blow-up potential is within the range of outcomes. So I will stack the Astros today and see how things play out. One thing I try to do is use guys who can be good against both lefties and righties because Hyun-Jung Young is one of the more likely relievers to pitch tonight for the Rangers. He's a lefty, Howard's a righty, and so is Dane Dunning. So I will skew towards guys who can hit both righties and lefties. That means I'd love to get Chas McCormick in there. He's $2,200. He is kind of in and out of the lineup, switching around with Jake Myers, so he might not play, but if he's in there, I will be in on McCormick for sure. He's known for hitting lefties, but I think he can hit righties too. Kyle Tucker can hit both righties and lefties. He's $3,400. I think that's under salaried. So McCormick, Tucker, two guys I think grade out pretty well based on the way I expect things to go for tonight for this for this Rangers pitching staff. Let's finish up here, things to watch, and talk about Clayton Kershaw. Pretty big pitch count concern for tonight because he's coming off the IL. He's been out since July. He didn't have any rehab starts. It sounds like they expect Kershaw to go around 60 or so pitches tonight, and even against Arizona, that's not enough. So I'm not going to have any Kershaw tonight. I likely won't be there for his next start either, where he'll probably be closer to like 75 or so. So wait and see on Kershaw, and we'll wait until the pitch count gets up before we dive back in. Not opposed to some one-offs on the Rangers. They're facing Jake Odorizzi, and he's still having big issues with fly balls. He does have a 21% strikeout rate, which is pretty low as well, and it's the worst skill interactive ERA on the slate. Problem is they're just not a good team. So DJ Peters works, Nate Lowe works, Adolis Garcia works. Those guys are all options, but they're more so like one-offs or mini stacks than I want to build around this offense stacks. Finally, I could see either using Pablo Espino as a pitcher or using bats against him because his 24% strikeout rate is not bad, and he's facing the Marlins, who really struggle offensively. That's why you could consider him as a pitcher because, it's a good matchup, stuff like that. But he also lets up a 43% hard hit rate and a 42% fly ball rate. The Marlins get a big park factor upgrade here. I am more inclined to stack against Espino and use the value plays in Jazz Chisholm, Jesus Sanchez, Lewin Diaz, stuff like that, but I can see both sides here. He could do well, but I think that I'm more inclined to get the value via those young power hitters than use Espino as a pitcher. Let's finish up here with the home run calls for today. The boring one, going against Logan Gilbert again. It's a bummer, I know, but hey, this is a good hitter. It's Rafael Devers. Devers gets out of Fenway. I know it's not a great park overall, but Fenway, pretty tough on lefties. So I think going to Seattle, probably a good thing for Devers. I like him here. Obviously, I'm in Schwarber, despite the fact that it's not been the best run for him. But Rafael Devers, the boring home run call for today. The fun one is in that Espino matchup. That is Jesus Sanchez. I like the power I've seen from him so far this year. Obviously, some prospect hype there as well. And it's a park factor upgrade for him. So home run calls for this Monday slate, Rafael Devers and Jesus Sanchez. That is all that we have here for today on the Solo Shot. But again, don't go anywhere. Coming up at 9 a.m. today, we're going to be breaking down our Week 1 NFL DFS takeaways on the FanDuel YouTube page, posted up on the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. After that, search for the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Check out that podcast. Hit subscribe, rate and review it. We appreciate those of you who have done so already. If you've got questions for me, I am on Twitter at JimSannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck to you tonight. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.